Australians will have their say to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in the Constitution through an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice with a referendum this year. Well, joining me live is Robbie, leader of the Australian Katter Party. Thank you so much for joining us. So let's talk about the voice, because we know that the voice will be an independent representative advisory body for First Nations peoples. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Janie. Well, firstly, I'd like to say, my family's got a proud heritage of being representatives of the Gulf region, North Queensland. I've been up there since the 1890s and really 4 generations of politics. And my grandfather, his funeral, they said one of the tributes they paid was our family employed the first Aboriginal people in Cloncurry in our shops and our stores, and they removed the segregation rails in the cinema as soon as they bought it. So we've got a proud history of trying to advance the prosperity of our first Australian people, particularly in the Gulf region, and we're very proud of that. And as fighters and people in the trenches, we see this as tokenistic and divisive, and I think perhaps counterproductive to people that are in the trenches trying to fight for the prosperity of these people. And time and time again, we've just seen the hypocrisy from government in their application here. And we see ourselves as a pretty strong voice already for these people, but it's a matter of getting people to listen. Because
you work with and you have friends, First Nations people, and as you said, a third generation of your family being in politics. So what are you hearing from your friends and your co-workers?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's probably a fair bit of indifference, and some people think probably a nice gesture, but I think really deep, really embedded in the DNA now of people in remote communities, whether you're black or white, Aboriginal, Chinese, whatever heritage you got, and it's very mixed heritage up there. I think a lot of people are distrustful when academics and these privileged people from the cities, academics, keep preaching to what we need to do to advance ourselves. Most of the time we know what to do up there. And I'm up in the Gulf, I would get 2 or 3 phone calls a day from the Gulf, particularly last few months. And I'm talking to people there all the time. I'm not saying I'm one of them, I speak to everyone, but I certainly go in pretty hard for them. And I think I'm a pretty effective politician. And I think I'm a pretty good voice for them right now, but they're telling me that there's other people who can do that a lot better. I think a lot of people are very sceptical about what this delivers, and I think most people know intuitively that this is just more white men, talk from the cities. Well, in fact, there's Aboriginal academics and whatever floating around in suits in the capitals now as well, who are telling us what is best for us. And I know a lot of things we need to be doing now, and I'm presenting that to Parliament as we speak. And that's not being acted on. So I think we've got a pretty good voice up there already. I think some of those mayors and representatives do a terrific job, and some of those members of Parliament, they have a go, and I certainly think I'm pretty competent at taking that voice forward. It's getting people to listen and act already is the problem, and I think this is the government's way of disguising the fact that they don't listen and they don't act, is let's pretend that the problem is that they need a voice.
And if we look at referendums in general, most of them fail. Out of the 44 that we've had, only 8 have gone through. And speaking to the Australian Electoral Commission today, they talk about the first hurdle and then the second hurdle being that the Northern Territory and the ACT, those numbers don't even get a look in. So it sounds confusing. It sounds, there's just so much to it. And I think a lot of people are certainly supportive of Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander people. There's not really much question there, but I think the question from many people is, what is this question going to be and what will it do?
Yeah, I think the Labor government and at both levels in Queensland where I am and at the national level, I think they're trying to prey on people's guilt. I think I'm sure there's some terrific people, some of our first Australians that are pushing for, to get better outcomes and are behind this cause and that they see it as a benefit. But as you just pointed out, there's some failures in the actual political process of how this works. But at the end of the day, I feel I'm someone that's pretty well qualified economist that is in the trenches now I'm focused on trying to get title deeds so that an Aboriginal person in Australia can own a home in their own community. That's a right they don't have right now. Both successive Liberal Labor governments, they deny them that privilege of being able to own your own house in this country, which is pure socialism, and they're denied that right. They're denied adequate hospital services. I was taking phone calls last weekend to a lady up in the Gulf country that hadn't been fed a breakfast in the hospital as of 90 years old. So the hospital conditions are just absolutely diabolical. The health conditions, the grocery prices. I pay $200 or $300 a week for my grocery bill. They'll pay up to $500 a week, and on the lowest income levels of Queensland in the Aboriginal communities I represent. They've got enormous problems right now. So we need to deliver title deeds, an opportunity, remove the barriers to get into work. We need to get housing going. We need to improve the health system. And like I said, reduce those grocery prices. They're the things, attack rheumatic heart disease. They're the things I'm interested in hearing about. This nebulous idea of the voice that's going to solve everything. I think that can only distract us for the next 5 or 10 years from focusing, and gives the government an excuse to not deliver on the things and get on the ground where we're needed and where we desperately need some help to help these people advance. But, just as recent as 2 weeks ago, I put a bill into Parliament, into the Queensland Parliament, that was simply about getting access to jobs in those communities by virtue of giving the decision-making away from someone in Brisbane to someone back in those Aboriginal communities. That was what I figured is the essence of the voice, and Labor Party in Queensland said, we can't pass this because if you do that, you'll compromise the outcomes in those communities. And that was their point in the debate. So it just proves the hypocrisy. And if there's one thing I will not tolerate in this debate is the hypocrisy. I will not be told that I have to do that and have guilt about this when I'm there working for these issues now. We have a voice right now. I think there's a lot of great Aboriginal leaders, mayors up there. They're all telling me, and gave me that legislation to put in Parliament. I put it there, it got voted down. So they're already telling people, look, we like having your ideas, but we don't actually accept them in Parliament. It's already been tried and failed, and I will not tolerate this hypocrisy forced on us. And I think the whole thing's been railroaded by the left woke agenda that just wants to drive this stuff into us. And I think it's unfortunate for a lot of the well-meaning advocates of Aboriginal people and First Australians that they've been hijacked through this to say that this is the panacea of all your problems. And I think that's pretty cruel in a way. And to top it all off, it's divisive. I think we're all one nation and we need to move ahead together. So, as someone that's deeply embedded up there, I'm not going to say I speak for everyone in the Gulf and those Aboriginal communities I represent, but I certainly do care for them like most Australians, and we do want to change those outcomes. I think most Australians are really heavily invested in that, but it's about getting right to what those issues are and making those practical outcomes, not some nebulous idea that's going to solve everything. I think we need to focus on those practical things, and that's what I try and focus on with the KAP party that I represent, and that's where we'll remain focused. And this stuff is just a sideshow for the politicians and the elites and the academics from the capitals that want to feel like they're doing something.
And Robbie, it's estimated that this referendum is going to cost $400 million. We have to wrap it up, unfortunately, but just quickly, what do you think will be the ramifications if the voice is a no from Australia?
Well, if the no, I think it'll be exactly the same as if it was a yes. I'll still be fighting for title deeds in those communities so that people can get a bank loan for a business or to buy cattle. I'll still be fighting for against rheumatic heart disease, lower grocery prices, and proper health outcomes in those regions. I'll still be fighting for exactly the same thing. So are the same people in those communities I talk to every day, and everyone. It'll be the people in Brisbane, Sydney, Canberra, and Melbourne that all get to feel good or bad about themselves. It's pretty irrelevant to what we do up there. We'll keep fighting the fight, and at the end of the day, it won't be that relevant to us.